Hey everyone, Pastor Patrick Walker here. It's been quite a long time since I did my last devotional. I got sick for a couple days, and then, through travel and just busyness, it's easy to get out of the habit. So I actually wanted to share something from 1 Samuel chapter 16, which is, 1 Samuel 17. I'll come back to 16 and maybe do a second devotional on that. But 1 Samuel 17 is about David and Goliath, and I think there's something that we can learn from Goliath here in contrast to David. It's amazing how we can read over the same passages and yet in a different season of life see something fresh, something new that can directly speak to our situation and our heart. So we see that Goliath comes out and he basically defies all of Israel and the God of Israel. So he's a representation of Satan, defying God's people and defying God himself for 40 days. And on the last day, David comes to visit his brothers to bring supplies. He hears what's going on. He says, why has nobody challenged him? I will go out and challenge him, right? When all of the rest of Israel was afraid. Now, here's where I want to pick up verse 41. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. And he said to David, am I a dog that you would come to me with sticks? Now, here's what's so interesting, and I had never really considered this before, but here Goliath is saying, send me a champion. Like, he's the best. He's the best on the Philistine side. Send me a champion to fight against somebody worthy. Like, don't dishonor me. Like, I want this to be the most honorable fight I've ever had. All right. Now, listen to this. It's crazy. So 40 days, 39 days, he gets nothing. Then comes out a boy to fight him, right? And Goliath, all his experience has led him up to this one confrontation. This could be technically the pinnacle of his greatest battle, his greatest hand-to-hand combat. He's been training to get to this point. And he is looking for a battle that will go down in the record books, a battle that he believes he can win because he's relying on himself, and he wants a battle that's going to bring him honor. And when this boy comes out, he feels dishonored because his perception of the situation is actually the opposite of what's really going on. So had he known that this boy was, in fact, the next anointed king of Israel, I think he would have looked at the battle completely differently. So had he known that this boy was the anointed of God, he was the greatest warrior on that side, and he had God's anointing, so he was God's representative. Just as Goliath said, I'm representing my gods. I defy Israel and I defy your gods. Send me a champion. Send me a man. So here steps out a boy that is representing Israel and representing Israel's God, just as Goliath is representing the Philistines and the Philistine God. So this is, in fact, the exact thing that Goliath had asked for, but he doesn't recognize it. So this boy is the anointed, the future king of Israel, and this confrontation is the greatest confrontation of Goliath's life. But because of pride, when we look at him, he says, he's trusting in his own power. He's trusting in his own abilities. He misinterprets the situation. He despises this boy, and he takes the confrontation for granted. He takes it too lightly. And oftentimes in sports, you get a better team and a not so good team, and that better team can fail to prepare adequately for what they consider to be this inferior football team. And the inferior football team can go on and win. I mean, we see that all the time where the underdog beats, the champion. And sometimes it's because the champion has so much pride, they don't prepare adequately, and they take for granted. That pride kind of blinds them to the reality of the contest. So here's the first lesson that I was just convicted about, is if we can step in Goliath's shoes, I think that sometimes we are facing situations, battles, confrontations, trials, difficulties, hurdles, whatever, that we think are just minuscule. We don't think they're, but in reality, in the spiritual realm, from God's perspective, just like Goliath, he took for granted this confrontation with this boy, when in reality, this was, in fact, his greatest battle ever. And it cost him his life because he wasn't prepared and because of pride. So could it be that we face, not saying every time, but I'm saying sometimes, could we face trials, difficulties, battles that are much more significant than we realize? We are coming up against enemies that are much stronger. And if we can get victory over them, it is going to mean breakthrough to an entirely new season of life or ministry. So you think about the two greatest moments in David's life is out of the blue, Samuel, the greatest prophet, the most respected man in all of Israel, comes to his home and he anoints him in front of his father and his brothers. That was a life-changing moment, because from that point forward, he was never the same. He had that prophecy, he had that vision, he had that future spoken, and it says the Spirit of God filled him from that day forward. So in the eyes of his brothers, in the eyes of his father, in his own eyes, his identity shifted. All right. And the second identity shift, where he goes from a shepherd boy to a warrior in the eyes of Israel, is when he faces Goliath. Now for him, he kind of knows this is my greatest moment. For Goliath, he takes it for granted. But I'm saying that there are confrontations where we may take them for granted, but that one confrontation could launch us or propel us to a whole new level in the spiritual realm or in our lives, or in a new level or new season of our life, if we take it seriously and we perhaps meditate on what this confrontation might mean in the spiritual realm. All right. Last thing I'll say here. So we see pride in Goliath. We see humility in David. And let me just finish with a couple statements from David. He says, this is confidence. David said to the Philistine, this is verse 45, "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled." So he makes it very clear that he is representing the Lord, while Goliath is trusting in his armament and experience. "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head." Now, it's interesting that David did not have a sword. So he's speaking prophetically because he didn't have a sword. That's actually a prophecy about the future, using Goliath's own sword to cut off his head, which is exactly what happens. "This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." I love that. So he is out for God's glory, not his own glory. Goliath, King Saul, out for their own glory. David, a man after God's heart, he wants God to be glorified. "All those who are gathered here will know that it is not by the sword or spear or experience or horses," you could fill in the blank, "it's not by human power that victory comes. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." So the battle is the Lord's. So no matter what you're facing, don't underestimate the importance of the battle. And also recognize that the most secure place to be is a place of humility and dependence, seeking that God would be glorified and honored through the engagement. It's not about us. It's about God's glory, God's honor. And I think if we prayed that way and we had that sincere motive in our heart, God would be willing to answer our prayer requests, because they're not selfish to build us up, but they are to give God an opportunity to build himself up in the eyes of the people, in the eyes of family, the unsaved, that we would have a testimony of God's goodness. He would get the credit. He would get the glory. And through that would draw people to him. So may that direct our prayer life just a bit, to take that humble, God-centered approach to praying and not take for granted the challenges, the battles that we face as Goliath did, but to recognize just in one instance, in one confrontation, could radically alter the direction of our life if we see that breakthrough in the battle, in prayer. That outcome as the Lord comes down and empowers us or works through us or works around us, miraculous breakthrough. All right, so hopefully that was encouraging to you, but some points to consider here in 1 Samuel 17. All right, till next time.